Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I am excited to introduce our speaker. I'm Leslie with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. I have also with me Anna Lena, who's also with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. And I always get so crazy excited about Eric Spellman because he gives us great information and he always makes me jump and he grabs my attention every time on all topics that he has. So today we had a webinar the other day. You can find that pre-recorded on demand on website, the beginning things. But today we're going to talk about 5 signs your website needs an overhaul. I'm sure we all can relate to that, and we're going to listen to Eric. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric Spellman.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Today's topic is an important one. Unfortunately, it's also going to be one that some of you aren't going to like. This is my cringe-worthy production here because I'm going to be saying some things and you're going to go, oh, yeah. So get ready to endure a little uncomfortableness as it relates to your website. But trust me, this is good. This is good. If you don't look at it, you don't examine it, you don't judge it, you never make it better. So here I am to destroy your website. Let's start. Number 1, you apologize for it. It's the biggest sign of all. How many times have you been around and someone said, hey, do you have a website? And you say something like, oh, yeah, we do, but just blah, blah, blah. Just give us a call instead or something like that. You apologize for it. You go, oh, yeah, we're still having it worked on. I'm sorry. If you feel uncomfortable sharing your website with somebody, there's a bigger issue. You see, your website must represent you. Your website must represent your company. And when people think of you, when they go to your website, they should feel that your company is bigger than it really is, not smaller. I mean, how many times have you gone to a website and it looked like it was built by a 12-year-old with a set of Crayolas? And you thought, gosh, this company looks very small, maybe a little one-person firm working out of a shack, when in fact it's a big company and you didn't know that. I also know a lot of companies who are a one-person shop working out of their home, and they have a website that makes them look like Amazon. So you can do this, but you have to be able to look at it. And the problem here is that no one is putting enough emphasis on websites. And trust me, you're not spending enough on your website. You got to realize it doesn't represent your company when you look at it. Okay. So when you stare at your website, you got to ask yourself, is this putting my company in the best light? Am I excited to show people my website? Does my website make people want to do business with me? Does it give them a good feeling about us? Does it make us seem stable? Does it make us seem not like a fly-by-night? We've all seen websites where it looks like, they just started business and they could go out of business tomorrow. You see, online, you have to lower what we call the trust barrier. Because people don't trust you if they've never been to your company before. They don't trust you at all. And so the goal of your website is simply to lower the barrier so that customers can get over it. So here's a question for you. Why do you even have a website? Why do you even have a website? Unfortunately, a lot of people who have not taken advantage of the amazing services of the SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, they don't realize how important a website is. Some people just see a website as a brochure, as an online billboard, and it's just another check on starting their business. Got a website, check, and then they forget about it. They don't do anything with it. They leave it up. They don't touch it for a year. And until one day someone says, hey, your website isn't working. And you go, oh, we forgot to pay hosting, or, oh, we forgot to do this. And then you go look at it and you realize, ew, If you're not looking at your own website, that's like you not looking in the mirror every morning. Okay? Your website is the #1 way people are going to get a first impression about you and your business. The #1 way. One way to think about it is this. Leslie, if I went up to you and I said, hey, there is an amazing restaurant you need to go to. I loved it. I know you haven't been there, but you got to go. It's amazing. What are you going to do? Are you immediately going to go to the restaurant? No, you're going to Google it. And based on whatever comes up, that's when you will decide what to. I have people all the time say, Eric, we don't get business from our website. We get it from referrals. People. And I'm telling you, you're exactly right. I truly believe in referrals. But what you got to realize is that when you refer a business to someone today, the first thing they're going to do is pull out their phone and Google it. And based on whatever comes up, that will determine whether they actually walk in the door. So you got to realize this is important. And to help answer that, you got to know the purpose of your website. Now, that's a whole nother topic in and of itself. We'll get to at some point, but I'll give you the short version. Purpose of your website is either to generate sales, and that's if you have a shopping cart on your site and you take credit cards, or the goal of the website is simply money, and the way we measure success is how much we're making. Another goal, that's only if you sell stuff directly from the website. A second purpose, which is what most websites are, is to get leads, is to get prospects, is to cause people to give you a call or to email you. So my question is this: how many leads or sales has your website given you in the last week, month, ever? People, you've got to start counting these things. In the online world, numbers are everything. And remember what I've always said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. I'll say it again. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. And if your website isn't generating leads, or if you don't know if it is, and you assume it is, that's a problem. Do your research. Do your research. Step one, when thinking about your website, before you call a web designer and say, I need a new website, I need an updated website. Trust me, the web designer doesn't know what you want. Designer doesn't know what the problem with your current site is. This is your job. This is you, the owner. Because you got to realize this website is not a billboard. This website is not a pamphlet. This website is the equivalent of the brick and mortar location you do business from. And trust me, you probably had a lot of say on how that was laid out, how that was decorated, how everyone's offices were put, and how business is done. You need to spend just as much time with your website, if not more. So, step one, before we look at your own website too much, I want you to go look at your competitors. And I want you to come up with 5 competitors that you have, either locally or nationally. People that you would say you directly compete with, for the kind of business that you do. Once you find these 5, I want you to go to each one of their websites, and I want you to write down 5 things you like about it, 5 things you hate about it. And you're going to do that for 5 different companies. And I'm here to tell you, even though that sounds like homework and it's Friday and the weekend and everything, this could be one of the most amazing things you ever do for your company. Because what's going to happen is when you go to your competitor websites, you're going to get ideas. You're going to see things that you hadn't even thought of. You're going to see where they're screwing up. You're going to see ways for you to improve. Start with your competitors. We're not talking about copying them at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I want you to evaluate what is the experience a potential customer has with that website. Is it better than yours? Because here's the deal. Remember, I've told you this before. Everyone on the internet has ADD and they're lazy. Everyone. everyone on the internet. And they're going to go to a website, and when they land on your homepage, you've got 5 seconds. 5 seconds. They're going to scan it from top left to bottom right. They're not reading everything on that page. They're not even scrolling yet. What they're looking for is either a title, a picture, a phrase, something that says this place might have what you're looking for. And if they don't see that in 5 seconds, guess what? They hit the back button and go to your competitor or whoever is next in the Google list they found you in. You only got 5 seconds with these people. You got to grab them from the beginning. To that end, you also got to realize that while you evaluating other people's websites is a good thing, you evaluating your own website may not be, or at least may not be as good. I highly recommend that you get some people who don't have any skin in the game to evaluate your website. And I mean, there's different things you can do. For instance, I like to watch them. If I ask someone who's never been to my website, I say, sit down and I want you to find this. I want you to find that. Give them a little test to find. See how long it takes them. See if it takes them more than 3 clicks. See, I have a little rule called the rule of 3 clicks. The rule of 3 clicks is I should be able to get to any page on your website within 3 clicks because I will not give you a 4th. If it takes longer than that to find what I'm looking for, I will leave. I should be able to get to any page on your website within 3 clicks. You can easily prove this out by looking at your own analytics, by looking at your own web statistics. And it'll tell you how many people actually dig down and go through 18 clicks to get to that one page that had what they were looking for. That's a design issue. It's a design issue. So watch them while they evaluate your site. And like I said, give them little tasks. And you can do this with your employees, but they're a little shaded and they will probably say it's nicer than it is. So I would recommend getting some people who don't, like I said, don't have any skin in the game and having them do it. And you sit back and just watch. Don't tell them how to do it. Don't tell them where to click. I want you to just watch them navigate. Watch them as they look. See how long it takes them. Time them. Don't help them at all. And if they finally say, I can't find it, guess what? You needed to hear that. Some people do not put the right emphasis on web design. They don't put the right emphasis, they don't put the right emphasis on their website. I often tell them, if the majority of your marketing budget is not towards online, you're behind. I'm not saying that newspapers aren't good. They really aren't, though. I'm not saying that radio is bad. I'm not saying that TV is bad, or billboards, or pamphlets, or sticking flyers under windshield wipers. I'm not saying all of that is bad marketing. I'm just saying the majority of your marketing, the biggest piece of your pie, should be your online. And your website is right there. Because like I said, it is the first thing people see. It is the first impression that the vast majority of people will have with your company. You need to spend more money on that than anything else. Did I see a question?
Let me check for you. Okay, we do have a question. Besides phone and price, what are good questions to ask?
Well, I would highly you mean to ask who? To ask someone evaluating your website? I'm assuming?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay. If someone is evaluating your website, you really just want to know, how long does it take them to navigate? Is it making sense? Another thing you could say is, if you see a word you don't understand, let me know. Because here's one of the problems a lot of people make. They design a website internally And so everyone involved is very familiar with the industry. Everyone involved is an expert. And so everyone involved starts using jargon that is used in that industry. And the problem is most laymen, most civilians, most people not working in that business don't know that jargon. And so what ends up happening sometimes is people make a website with words that their viewers don't understand. And so when you don't understand it, it makes you feel stupid and you leave. Dumb it down. I tell people all the time, you better take it to a 5th grade level. If you cannot describe your business to a 5th grader, you're not doing a good job here. I don't care what you do. You've got to be able to explain what you do. And you've got to use words that normal people understand. And so one of the things you might check is look at the jargon that you're throwing out there on your website and realize that if people don't know what it means, it just makes them feel stupid. And that's not what you want to do with your competitors. Another thing you can do is you can ask them, hey, what's the best thing you like about this website? And what's the thing you dislike the most? I mean, just be blatant about it and see what they say. Okay. So, but like I said, it only works if you get someone who's going to be real with you. Don't choose your best friend who's going to say, oh, it's amazing. And you say, you're not even looking at it. You know what I'm saying? You don't want that. You don't want a yes man. You need someone who will just sit down with you and go, now, honey, I need to tell you something. That's who you need right there. Okay. Hope that answered your question. If not, ask again. Okay. Let's move on. Number 2, no one can find your website. That's also how you know you need an overhaul. Some of y'all don't even know if people can find your website. You know, it's like Google acts like you don't even exist. Okay. People go to Google and you can't find it. Have you ever tried to search for your business on Google without typing in your business name? Because I always used to say, do you show up in Google? And everyone always says, yes, we show up in Google. And I say, well, how do you show up in Google? And they go, well, I type my business name in and boom, Google knows about it. I show up number 1 for my business name. Guess what? That is a small amount of people looking for you online, people who know your business, but the vast majority do not. The vast majority want your product, but they don't know your name. The vast majority know your industry, but they don't know the players. The vast majority want to find someone to do business with. So my question is, do you come up for what you do? You've got to realize that search engine optimization matters, also known as SEO. Okay, you'll see us say that all the time. Search engine optimization basically means designing your website in a way that Google sees you relevant for certain searches. That's it. That's all it is. You're not trying to cheat. You're not trying to, rig the game when you do SEO. Some people think that. It's not. It's, you know what? Our company legitimately makes this. And if people look for this, we need to show up because we're a player. And if that's not happening, it's probably because of your content. And one of the ways to start is to realize what people are searching for. They've done so many studies on this, on how people use the internet on a day-to-day basis. And you got to realize that when people do a search on Google, they're either looking for the answer to a question or the solution to a problem. Typically, that's it. Answer to a question or solution to a problem. Well, of course, you got those people that just want to be entertained, watch a video, but let's focus on websites. They want a solution to the problem or an answer to a question. Too many companies push their products and they never push the problem that caused people to need that product. Another way of explaining it is this, and you're not going to like what I have to say next. Trust me, it's going to grate on you, and a few of you may even hang up. But listen here, I'm going to tell it to you straight. No one wants what you sell. They don't. They want the value that it brings. Let me say that again. They don't want your product. They don't want your service. They want the value that it brings. No one wants a shovel. They want a hole. And when you as a business owner realize that little truth, you'll start designing your website to talk all about the value and not the product. You see, when Google looks at websites and tries to determine what they're about, if you never discuss the problem or challenges that causes your product or service to be necessary, if you never talk about why people use what you do, you will never show up for the reason. You follow me? No one's searching on your products. They're looking for a solution. It's kind of like there was a plumber I met with one time. And he goes, Eric, I don't know what it is. My website's not doing anything. He says, I come up for plumbing, okay, but I'm not getting any business. And I said, well, have you looked at how people look for plumbers? And he goes, no. And I said, well, basically, if you do the studies, you'll realize people think they can fix stuff themselves. And so their searches reflect that. And so they'll type in something like, how do I fix a broken pipe? Or how do I fix a clogged sink? And those are the searches. And so we tried those, and his site did not come up at all, because you know what? His plumbing site never talked about clogged sinks. It never talked about broken pipes. All it talked about was plumbing services. Does that make sense? If you don't discuss here, I'll just put it in a real nice way that you can remember. If you don't talk about the problem, you'll never show up as the solution. How was that? If you don't talk about the problem, you'll never show up as a solution. Because people are searching on problems. They're not searching on your product. They're not searching on your service. So let's talk about SEO just a little bit. And I'm actually going to be having a full-on presentation in the future on SEO that'll go way deeper than what we're about to do now. But this will at least get you understanding where we need to be with your website. Step one is to realize how search engines work. And there's more than one out there. Google isn't the only one, but between me and you, Google's the only one, okay? Bing doesn't matter. Yahoo doesn't matter. All the rest of them don't matter, okay? And that's because Google has about 95, 96% of all search traffic. So the only search engine that you need to focus on is Google. And believe it or not, the rest tend to fall in line. So here's how they work. Basically, a couple of students way back in the day, the early days of the internet, they worked at some university, and what they did was they created a computer program that would land on a website. Let's say your website. And what it would do is gobble up or index or store every single word on that website. In other words, this robot, if you will, spider bot is what we call it, would land on the first page of your website and would store every single word on it. Then the robot would follow every link to every other page on your site. In other words, it would just crawl like a spider on a web, get it? And index every word on every page of your website. Then it'll jump off and go to another website. And that's what spider bots do. There's hundreds of thousands of them, and chances are your website gets visited quite often by these little robots. Some of your traffic is robots. And so all those words get stored. And these two students, they did that. They started it off on one website, just let it run all night. When they came back the next morning, they realized that they had indexed, now back in the day when the internet was small, back in the day, they figured out they had indexed about 90%, 98% of the entire internet to the word. Well, they quickly realized they could make money doing this, so they quit college. And eventually what they ended up doing was creating a company called Google. And well, they weren't the only search engine out there. Other people figured out what they did and tried to do it better, but these guys did a great job. And so then they made it to where you could search for something. And it would basically tell you, and you would type in words, and the search engine would tell you every single page on every single website that had those words on it. Well, search engines quickly realized that, well, how do you know which is the best one? Because people were choosing search engines by how well they did. In other words, by how relevant the results were. I mean, yes, it may mention plumbing. This website mentions plumbing, but it's terrible. It's not what I'm looking for. This one mentions plumbing, but it's terrible. So Google and these other search engines had to figure out a way to let all of the best results rise to the top, to where the first result is what Google considers the most relevant link. How do they decide relevancy? Listen closely, pay close attention, because I've had people tell me that what I say next has been the biggest help for them in being found on Google. In the old days, the search engines did it based on how many keywords there were. In other words, if your site mentioned plumbing more than once, it went above the one that mentioned it only mentioned it once. If it mentions it 8 times, that one rises above the one that mentioned it 3 times. But web designers quickly figured that little ploy out. And so what some of them did, and maybe you remember this from back in the old day, they would type certain keywords at the bottom of their screen or in text that blended in with the background, kind of embedding keywords to be found by the spider bots. So the people at Google said, oh, no, we can't do that, because that's called keyword spamming. And so Google no longer does that. So don't let anyone tell you that the key to SEO is mentioning certain words over and over and over again. If Google catches you doing that, you're done. They might even delist you, which is basically website suicide. You might as well go build another website at that point, because you're never going to be found. So you got to be careful with this, because there's ways of doing it that are cheating, and Google is onto that. So realize that's how search engines work. The way that they work now is mostly about concepts. You see, Google it's not about keywords anymore. It's about concepts. Google understands that lawyer and attorney are the same thing. And so it doesn't matter which one you use, because you're talking about law topics. You follow me? Google is smarter than you realize. This computer system, and I know this is going to sound all Terminator and stuff, but Google's systems are extremely smart. And they can even tell when you are putting in a word more often than it should appear normally. And so they look for concepts. The key is text. That's why blog sites do so well on search engines, because there's so much text. Remember, all that matters is Google. Remember, Google's the only search engine that matters, and all that matters is text. Google doesn't see pictures. It kind of does, but it doesn't really know what's in them. They're getting better at that, but I could have 100 pictures of giraffes on my website, and I wouldn't get any credit for any searches on giraffes unless I talked about giraffes in the text. Here's the other thing about the content. Your content must be unique. In other words, your text. The text on your website must not exist anywhere else, nowhere else on the planet. And I'm including product descriptions. So even if the maker of the product that you're selling gave you the product description and you just copied and pasted it onto your website, you get no credit. They do, but you don't. Because when Google finds a copy of something, the original is the only one that gets credit. So if you have any copied stuff on your website, and I'll talk about that in the future, how to check for that, but just realize that Google's only after unique. So if someone copied, if your web designer copied something from somewhere and you're not getting found, that's probably what happened. It must be understood, and you've heard me say this before, but your website must be written for a 5th grader. It really must. That's not sarcasm. That's not a joke. The reason we use fifth grade is because for the longest time, the word conversational, the way we talk, most of us, the vast majority of us speak like a fifth grader when we're talking to each other. We don't use complete sentences. We use words that will be quickly understood. We use simple words so that our communication comes across. Whether we know the other person's education or not, we use words that communicate. So what you need to learn to do is to learn to write like a fifth grader. And that means you don't use big words. That means you use very simple words to describe what you do. And if you're saying, well, how do I know what level my writing is? Well, guess what? There's so many ways to look it up. In fact, Microsoft Word, even if you have that, it'll tell you what grade level you're writing at. Sadly, most people will operate at a 10th, 11th, even 12th grade level of writing, and no one wants that, trust me. And Google will never show you ever. Think about it. If I wrote a thesis on plumbing, it'll never show up as the first result in Google. Why? Because I'm doing it at a college level. And when Google looks at that result, they'll see all those big words in it and they'll say, you know what? The vast majority of people who click on that thesis will not understand it. So I'm not going to make them first. I'm telling you, we've proven it. Google looks at readability. Google looks. And if you take it down to fifth grade, I've had customers say, I changed all my text down to fifth grade level and boom, they went to page 1. And one of the biggest things Google needs, it needs you to add to it. It needs you to continue. You see, a lot of people think of a website like a billboard. In other words, once it's completed, it's done and you never touch it again. Maybe one day you replace it, you don't touch it, and that can't be it. A website is a living, breathing, growing thing. And which means, and if you're not feeding Google regularly from your website with new content, because remember, they always want to show the most relevant first. They always want to show the most up to date. What?
You were popping in and out for a minute. I'm glad you're back up again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't see anything on my side. How weird. So I'm telling you, Google, they look at how often you update. And when I say update, I don't mean go in and change something. I mean add to. Okay. So you've got to realize that a website is just the beginning. And if you're not updating, I mean adding to your website every month at least, come on, people, then you're not going to be found very well. Okay, the number 3 way that you know your website needs to be overhauled is your contact form. You know, that little form on the contact us that you have, okay? Here's a question, and I'm being honest. Has anyone ever filled that out ever on your website? Have you even tested it to see if it works? And if it does work, where does that go to? Because you got to realize the way these forms work is it creates an email that goes to someone. So my question is, does it work? And if so, who's it going to? Hopefully your sales department or you even. If you haven't tested your contact form, you need to, because it may not be working this whole time because of something happened. And all these people are trying to get a hold of you and you're ignoring them. You don't realize you're ignoring them because you don't realize it doesn't work. And you're losing all this business. How much info do you ask for? When you have a form, how much do you ask for? I tell people you only need to ask for the name, email, and phone. 3 things: name, email, and phone. You know, some people say, well, don't we need to know their address? Don't we need to know, all this kind of, no, we don't. All we need is a way to contact them. That's it. That's all we need is a way to reach out to them. You're saying, well, okay, Eric, if the goal is the minimum, because here's the deal. The bigger your form is, the fewer people will fill it out. Now, that's the truth. How many times have you gone to a contact us form and it looked like they were asking for everything but your mother's maiden name? You're not going to fill that out. Only ask for name, email, and phone. You could add one more on there, like ask us anything, like a question, you got a question, a comment, whatever. But other than that, that's all you need. Because remember, everyone on the internet has what? ADD, and they're lazy. So how do you get that lead? Using the contact form. We've talked about that a little bit. If your contact form is not generating any leads for you, and I tell people this all the time, you need to ask, how many leads are we getting? How many leads are we getting from that contact form a week? And if the answer is 0, there's something wrong. You're not doing it right. Too many people think of the contact us form as just an afterthought and don't realize that it could be their primary lead generator. The key to understand is that personal information has a value. And no one's just going to give you their information because you ask for it. But they will trade for it. They will, if you give them something in return, they will happily give you their information. And I can prove this out. I mean, think about every conference you've gone to. When you go back to the vendor area and all those vendors with their little tables, every one of them has one thing in common. They usually have a fishbowl on their table. And in that fishbowl is a whole bunch of business cards. Now, how did that business card get into that fishbowl? Chances are it's because that person wanted to enter a contest to win the iPad, or they wanted to get a t-shirt or a luggage tag or a koozie or whatever they're giving away. So they give their business card. You see what I'm saying? They traded their personal information for something. Now, I'm not saying you need to go out and buy a whole bunch of promotional materials. Not at all. You got to figure out what they want. And you got to figure out what they want that's not a thing you can hold in your hand. What most people want is information. What most people want is a solution. Okay. And I'm not going to go into as great a depth on that here as I do in one where we talk about generating leads. But just know you've got to come up with a trade that they will happily give you their personal information for whatever it is you're going to offer them. The model I like to use with contact us forms is basically where I make an offer of something, like let's say a realtor website. So maybe it's a report, and on my homepage I have a teaser, and it basically says, download our top 10 mistakes you can't afford to make when selling your house report. Okay. Now, if you land on a realtor's website and you're looking to sell your house, you'd want to read that. And so you click on that. And guess what? When they click on that on your website, they're going to go right to that report. Could be a web page, could be a PDF, could be anything. And it basically gives the 10 reasons. Boom, right there, single pager. And you're saying, well, Eric, they didn't give us their information yet. It's okay. That's what the freemium model does. We give them the information free, but then we offer them something bigger at the bottom of that. We say, well, we gave you 10, but did you know there's really 50? All you have to, we'd love to email the full report to you. And all we need is a little information. Boom, that's where the trade happened. Now, the reason we gave them the 10 free was to lower the trust barrier. In other words, we made a promise, we kept our promise. We are now making you another promise. And because we kept our first promise, you will probably believe that we will keep that as well. And so your trust in us increases, but the trust barrier, the barrier keeping them from doing business with you goes down. Any questions on that? Okay. Number 4, and I'll be going into greater detail on some of that in a later one when we talk about, turning your website into a lead generating machine. So don't stop watching. We've got so much more that will benefit you. The number 4 way you know that your website needs to be overhauled is you can't update it. You had it built by someone who has to make all the changes themselves. So every time you need a change, you have to call the web designer and say, I need you to, this staff member is gone. Can you replace them with this staff member? And guess what? Every little change, cha-ching, cha-ching. And so what ends up happening? On some of your changes, you hold off and you say, you know what? That costs us money every time. So let's wait until we have a bunch of changes to make and we'll do them all at once. So guess what? Your website, and that's why I put webbing all over this website, your website gets old. It becomes stale. It becomes not updated, not current, and therefore not relevant. So what should you update? Because that's also a question. Should you update everything? Should you want the ability to update everything? I don't think so. It's kind of like a house. When you buy a house, which is much like a website, when you buy a house, you're probably not going to be the one, if you go in, you just want to decorate it. You want to put furniture where it goes. And maybe you want to change a picture now and then or rearrange the furniture, and that's fine. But if you need to knock down a wall, if you need to add on a room, chances are you're going to hire a professional to do that. So that's what I'm saying here. You need the ability to change the text on the website, maybe even change some pictures and things like that. But if you need to add something brand new to it or really make a huge update, let the professionals handle that. It's construction, okay? So what you should want the ability to update is stuff like that. You want the ability to add blogs, to add text, change pictures, add teasers, things like that. And the way to do that is when you have a new website built, you ask for a CMS, which is short for Content Management System. In other words, it's a special piece of software that allows you to make updates to your website very easily. And it almost looks like a word processor where you can type right into it. And it turns what you type into all the correct code to work on a website. It's kind of between you and the website. WordPress is the biggest CMS out there, and that's what it is. It's a content management system that allows people to update it, non-technical people. I prefer it, not because of its interface, not because it's the easiest one to use, because it's not really, but because it's the biggest. I'm always a fan of the biggest because if I have trouble, I can find people who know it, who can help me. But if you choose, Uncle Lenny's CMS in a box, what happens when there's a problem? What happens when Lenny gets hit by a bus? What are you going to do? I like WordPress. It works very good. And so when you talk to a web designer, ask them what CMS they use. Try before you buy on CMSs. I would go look at reviews. Like if someone says, oh, well, we use this, the Zombie CMS. Well, you better go Google that and say, do people really like that? Or we use this, or we use that. Go find out. So one of the biggest questions you need to ask is, how am I going to update this website? And if they say, well, you don't need to worry about that. You just do your business. We'll update it for you. No, ma'am. You also need to understand that there's another platform, which is also a CMS, but they're a little different. I like to think of them as the Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, those kind of people. Now, the difference between WordPress and Wix and Squarespace, Weebly and others, is that WordPress will work on any server. You can host it practically anywhere. In other words, where your website exists on whatever server, on whatever company, it doesn't really matter. But with Wix and Squarespace, you have to host with them, period. You don't have a choice. You can't move it. You can't take it somewhere else. If you do, you'll have to build a new website. Okay, so realize that some CMSs actually tie you down in hosting to them. It's not a bad thing. It isn't, because Wix and Squarespace are actually much easier than WordPress. I'll be honest. Wix and Squarespace are, but you can't host where you want. You're going to host with them and you're going to pay them. And part of your hosting is actually going to be a little bit higher than other people's hosting because you're paying for the CMS itself. Shopify is a different kind of critter altogether. If you have a website that you need to take credit cards with securely and safely and not worry about hackers and people stealing your customers' credit cards and all that, then you need a special CMS where that takes place. I am not a fan of homemade e-commerce systems, not at all. I tell people all the time, with today's hackers are not, little teenagers in their parents' basements anymore. That's not what a hacker is anymore. Today's hackers are countries. Today's hackers are PhD level hackers. Okay. And that's their job. And their job is to break into stuff and either steal secrets or use that system for nefarious purposes or who knows what. Okay. And you know what they're after? They're after financial stuff for the most part. So they look for e-commerce systems that aren't updated. They look for e-commerce systems that aren't supported. And the biggest one out there is Shopify. It's the best one, in my opinion. And I don't gain anything by telling you that. Trust me. I'm just telling you, if you're going to do online and you're going to take credit cards, go with a big, 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 big company. And the reason I like Shopify, and yes, you will have to host with them, but the reason I like Shopify is because there's a lot of developers out there who can do a lot of cool things with it. So if you need to like show your products in a certain way, in a certain order, have special things, they can do that. It's an amazing system, and you can find it just by going to shopify.com. Number 5, the final one, is your website look awful on a cell phone? Now, some of y'all are saying, oh my gosh, I've never even looked at our website on a cell phone. You better. Because many of you, when you look at it on a cell phone, your website's just going to be a much smaller version of the one you have on a computer. And you can't read anything, and you'll have to zoom in to see anything. You've got to realize that half of your views are mobile. Half of all, they say 53% of all views of your website are from people using a smartphone, using an iPhone or an Android or a little tablet. It's not in front of a computer. So what kind of experience are your website viewers getting? The way you can test whether you have a good one or not is when you go to your own website on a phone, do you have to zoom to read it? Do you have to scroll left and right because it's too wide for the phone? Those are the ultimate tests. Also, does it load slow? For instance, maybe you have your pictures on there are just monstrously huge. And so they take forever to transfer. And on people's mobile phones where they're using towers and they're not on some high speed, company internet, when they're just using a tower out in the middle of nowhere, if it takes forever for your website to come up, you know what they're going to do? Hit the back button and go to the next guy. So here's some tips. You've got to understand the difference between mobile and responsive. Okay. Back in the day, when smartphones were really starting to take off, web designers realized that they needed a better experience on a smartphone for someone to look at a website. So what they did back then was web designers would build a copy of your website, but one that works on a mobile size. One's easier to read. So you basically had 2 websites. You had a regular website and a mobile website. And if you needed to make change, you need to change both. Well, that became too clunky. So some software people came up with a responsive website. Now, a responsive website is one that realizes how they're being looked at and automatically adjusts for that device. In other words, you're only entering the information once, but it responds to how it's being looked at. It automatically rearranges itself, changes its font size to work on a small phone. You want responsive. You want a responsive website, not a mobile website. Also, optimize those graphics. And by graphics, I mean, make them small to where it doesn't take a lot to transfer them over. When you take a picture with a smartphone and you just want to upload it to your website, don't do that. Because if you upload it, most pictures are at least a few megabytes. And if you put that picture in your website and it's a few megabytes, then it'll take forever to download onto people's smartphones. What you can do is you can optimize those graphics to where instead of megabytes, it's down to maybe a 3 or 4K. And I know that's kind of technical. Don't worry about it. Just realize, think of it as taking some of the air out of the graphics without affecting how they look. Okay. And also, how are the menus handled? Because remember, you have your navigation menu in your website, when you're on a computer and you can drop down those menus and all that. What does that even look like on mobile now? Typically, what mobile uses for those is what we call the hamburger. Okay. The 3 stripes. And when you click that, that's the menu. Okay. That's a symbol you're starting to see more and more with mobile, is we call it the hamburger. Okay. And we have a question.
Okay, let's see what we got. Are you suggesting we optimize graphics for laptop version or mobile version or both?
That's a great question. I recommend that you optimize them for both, because if you optimize them correctly, you're not changing the quality of them. In other words, they look exactly the same, whether it's on a computer or whether it's on a phone. Okay. So I would optimize them and graphic designers know how to do that. Web designers know how to do that. And if you Google it, you can know how to do it. There's even free websites where you can take a picture and you just upload it and boom, it gives you back the optimized version. And then you can upload that to the website. So yeah, I always try to make my graphics as small a file size, not small in the size of the picture, like height and width, small in file size. Okay. That's what's important. You don't want to lose any quality, because you can optimize to the point where it looks all grainy and sketchy. No, that's a great question.
And I want to remind everyone, if anybody has any questions or would like to raise their hand and talk to Eric, just type your questions into the Q&A or raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak.
Excellent point. The other thing is, do you have click to call? Because sometimes people are on your website and they go, you know what? I just want to call them. I Googled them just because I want to get their phone number. Well, here's the deal. If you're looking at your website on your phone, can you just click the phone number and it will call from the phone? Or do they have to copy and paste the phone number into their phone to call it? You need click to call, and that's not hard at all. Another question?
Yes, we have another question. Is one page site better than many pages?
That's a good question, but it depends. A one-page site can be useful because it all loads in one fell swoop and navigation is pretty quick. But if you have a lot of information, like you do a lot of blogs, that will never work. And when you update your website, one-pagers don't really do it, because what are you going to do? Just keep making it longer and longer and longer and longer. So if it's a very small thing where it's not going to change, like an event, a little event website, sure, one pager is fine. But I'll be honest, if you want the website to be found, it's going to grow. And if it's going to grow, you're going to need more than one page. Good question, though. If you really want to know what Google thinks, because Google looks at whether your website is mobile friendly or not. Did you know that? And that actually affects your SEO. That affects how you rank in Google, is whether it is mobile friendly. Here's your homework. Go to Google and do a search on mobile friendly test. Scroll past the ads and you will see Google's, the one from Google, which is totally free. And click on that and you simply enter your website in and it will tell you whether it's mobile friendly, and if not, what needs to be fixed. Totally free. Google tries to help you. So once again, how you find that out, whether your website is mobile friendly or not, go to Google and do a search on mobile friendly text. Scroll past the ads. Don't choose the ads. Those are company. Okay. Till you get to the, the real answers. And then you'll see Google will be number one. Click on that one and enter your website, and Google will tell you.
I'm doing that right now.
Plan a redesign. Remember, have a purpose. Know your return on investment. We talked about that last time as well. Know how to measure whether, are you getting leads? How are we going to measure this? What is the value of a lead? Research your industry, okay? And that's a big piece of this. You've got to know what's happening in your industry as it relates to the online world. And decide who builds it. Is it going to be you using like Wix or Squarespace or Shopify? Or are you going to hire a web designer who might build it in WordPress or just straight HTML or however they build it? Okay. Questions on anything we've gone over? Last chance.
So I know it's our last chance, and if anybody would like to raise their hand or ask a question, but I want to ask you, what about, is there a way to check if your fonts, is that kind of a big thing? Because I know fonts change and you think that they may be up to date, but there's some old fonts that look a little older and there's some new ones. Would that have something to do with knowing if
Not
your
really.
website needs?
Okay. Not really. Most fonts are very web safe. And the CMS will control that, what fonts you can actually use that are web safe. Back in the day, there was an issue where someone might use a font, some weird, funky font, and it would look like garbage, but that no longer exists. That's not really an issue anymore.
Okay, and we have Daniel that's raised his hand. Would you like him to?
Sure.
Okay, well, let's see. Let me find Daniel. Okay. Daniel, you are allowed to talk if you would like to.
Thank you. What about websites where you just want to give information and you're not really selling anything?
Why would you do that?
Just to generate traffic.
Why? What's the purpose? I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just trying to say, why would you do that? Because here's the deal. In the end, I want my website generating money one way or another. And unless I'm a nonprofit, even if I'm a nonprofit, I have to have some metric to measure success with. And typically, just having something out there is not enough to warrant the cost. I have to have a goal. Like nonprofits, they're either trying to generate donations or generate volunteers. News sites, even news sites that post to be informational, that's not their goal. Their goal is not to be informational. Their goal is to sell advertising. You follow me? The information is what brings the eyeballs. So I would probably dig a little deeper into what you're trying to do. You follow me?
So if I want to give out like free medical information, and then
maybe go to social media. I wouldn't even use a website for that.
Social media?
Yeah, I would just use social media for that because like I said, there's going to be a recurring cost to this website. And the website's got to be generating leads or sales, leads or sales, leads or sales. Now, a website can support an existing customer base. Like once they are a customer of yours, you can have a knowledge base of articles that help them use your product or service and all that. Now, I get that. That's informational, but that's to existing customers.
Okay.
But if you're going to have a site that gives out information, then my hope would be that you somehow make money from it, at least to support the cost of the website. Like sell some ads on it, or, put a paywall on it and charge them if the information is that good. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It can't just be, I'm going to put up a website with information on it.
Right.
We have another question coming in I'd like to get to just real quick.
Sure.
Is Shopify good if you sell limited services and no physical products? Here's the second. Also, are customers turned off by being detoured to PayPal to pay for services?
Yeah, Yeah, I'll start with the second one first. Yeah, actually just get an account. Your SBDC counselor can help you kind of start on that down that road. Is you need to get a merchant account. And that, yeah, you don't need to be, because when you do the little PayPal thing and all that, it almost makes you look a little fly by night. Okay. Kind of like an Etsy seller, just like someone working from their home. Now, what was the first question again?
Is Shopify good if you sell
Shopify,
limited?
okay.
Yeah.
If you have a service, like for instance, let's say you have a service where you just want to schedule people like haircuts, okay, then no, Shopify is not for you. Okay. So what I would do in those cases, there are very specific companies that cater to that scheduling pieces. So you could have a regular website built that has blogs and all that, but then you can have the web designer embed, in other words, insert the piece that allows people to self-schedule. And you can look up scheduling scheduling websites, things like that, and you'll find them. There's websites that will do just about everything you could ever need to be done, and that can just be inserted on a regular website. But no, Shopify is primarily for products that people buy in that moment. Great question.
We do have another question, but before we get to the last question, I do want to update then everyone to, if you would like to receive no-cost business counseling through New Mexico Small Business Development Center, please visit the website at nmsbdc.org. Also, we have next week coming up on Monday, employee or independent contractors, which is which. Then we're going to have Eric again on Tuesday. Promote your business to the world for $5. So our wrap-up question is, what is the benefit of a merchant PayPal account?
The merchant account allows you to take credit cards, period. And that's how money flows on the internet. Okay. That is how money flows. And so you've got to have that. And it's got like Shopify will ask you for that. What is your merchant credentials? And you need to be doing business with a merchant account. And you have to have that, which means you're going to fill out some information about your bank account so that the money, when it flows, it eventually ends up in your bank account. And this is where they find out if you're a real business or not. So another place to go to find a merchant account is your bank. Wherever you have your business bank accounts, walk in there and say, hey, do y'all handle merchant accounts? They'll know what that is. But be sure and tell them it's for the web, okay? That it's for the internet. So because some will go, oh, well, no, we thought you meant you wanted a machine you can like swipe. So, but your counselors at the SBDC, trust me, they can start you on this path.
Yep.
We
want to thank everyone for attending today, and we want to thank Eric because again, every time Eric does a webinar, we always have so many questions coming in, especially at the end, because I think, like me, I just start thinking of all these questions I want to ask him. So we're looking forward to his next webinar coming up. And again, if you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I'm going to dismiss everyone for today, and we will see you. I want to say on the flip side, I know that sounds weird, but see you next time. Have a great day.